What I wanted to speak to all of you about is obviously is a question that is it's very pertinent for me personally and has been for a very long time, and it's something that we all share. This is an issue that you brought up tonight when you were speaking, which is the very unique and challenging position that we're all in as playing the role of a guru in a postmodern, secular context. And Swamiji, when you were speaking earlier, you were speaking about the enormous challenges that puts upon one whose destiny has thrust that role upon them, and who's bold enough or who's audacious enough to actually assume such a role at this particular time in history. So it's this challenging predicament that we're all in that I would really like to address with all of you and really see where we go with it. So the role of a guru in our culture at this particular time is a very challenging one, as you mentioned earlier in your talk. And I don't know how deeply you went into it, but the implication was that culturally, the position of the guru in a spiritual context is not accepted. Is culturally not accepted. And one thing that's coming to my mind as I'm saying this, that in the work that I do with my students, we've often gone into this particular subject, and one of them pointed out to me once that it's very interesting that in our particular time in history, you can be a business guru, you could be a sports guru,
golf guru.
You could be a golf guru, but when that's all culturally very acceptable. But if you're a spiritual guru, then it's not acceptable anymore. So, as I'd like to pursue the difference between a spiritual teacher and a guru as we continue to talk together, I'd be interested to hear or to begin to explore why it is. First of all, I'd like to go into the question of why it is that culturally the position that the guru takes is so unaccepted in our culture, not only for Eastern masters or Eastern gurus, but all the more so for Westerners who would assume that position. Swamiji?
Recently, one of the most interesting things that has happened for me, at least that I think, in the field of psychology, which is a big field that continues to develop, is the definition of codependency as a disease.
Mm-hmm.
It strikes me as interesting because what is the fundamental advantage that human beings had in an evolutionary sense over all other animals that exist, on the planet in our time? Well, that was that we could work together.
We could consciously choose to work together.
Well,
freely choose
the point is here that in America we have this idea which is really pushed on us. It's an idea that companies push on us, our employers push on us, that our government pushes on us, that people who are trying to sell us stuff push on us, that we have to be independent, we have to be separate, we have to take, the responsibility that we take for ourselves is a responsibility to be afraid of one another and to, be suspicious and to be, only loyal to our own self-interest. And this is how people are conditioned.
So you're saying the issue has to do with an emphasis on the ideal of being an independent entity in, for example, American culture,
and a competitive independent entity.
So if the idea of independence inhibits this whole guru notion, especially or most specifically in a spiritual context, why is that? What's the conflict between the emphasis on being an independent individual or entity in Western American culture and the role that the
Right.
guru plays in the spiritual life.
The way that it actually functioned, of course, there's no problem whatsoever.
Mm-hmm.
I don't think that independence is an issue at all in terms of the guru-disciple relationship, because
Not ultimately.
at any point,
Okay.
because we're always ourself, and we're always independent, and we always have the responsibility for our own choices. But it is interesting to me that particularly in the last 30 years or so, this whole issue of gurus and the bad rap that gurus get has really intensified a lot. Remember in the 60s and 70s, established religion in this country, i.e. Christian churches and Jewish synagogues, were losing members like crazy to, quote, new religions and Eastern religions. And so what they did was they got organized and created some organizations to go out and bad rap Eastern organizations as they established and promoted values within themselves and in the media that really spoke very badly about gurus, and made it seem like what a guru wants to do is subjugate you to their will. So you have, at least my view is, you have this basic American cultural tendency to promote independence and self-reliance, and then you have this overlay of competitive, propaganda that seeks to make
from the traditions.
Yeah, okay. That seeks to make us look like we're a threat to the well-being of regular human beings.
Okay, Swamiji.
Well, I would go back to a day in 1970 when I met the spiritual teacher Ramdas, and I had a private conversation with him. And the message that he communicated to me, I don't know if his words did, but his communication to me was, gurus or realized beings or enlightened sages exist now, not just 2,000 years ago or longer, not just Jesus or the Buddha, but they exist now. And when I got that message, I was so excited. I didn't know anything about a cultural taboo. I wanted to go there because I was searching for wisdom. And if you told me that a realized being, a person centered in the self, existed, I'm there. And I think, and it came as a shock to me, because I think the cultural myth, you see, there is a guru who stands like a colossus over our culture, and that's Jesus. And so because of the way people think, and when you go to India, you see the Indian way of hagiography and of talking about saints, and everything is expanded a certain way. So with Jesus, the way his followers thought about him, I think distorted what he really was, which essentially he was a God-realized sage. So instead we think that this person was the only one that ever attained that, and there's no model for others. But in the East, they know that there are many realized sages, many traditions of it. And when I found that out, I said, wow, fantastic. So I think there's a wrong cultural attitude, and the fact that people are so worried and uptight about the guru shows that the guru is coming.
But what's the reason that you feel quote unquote people are so uptight about it?
Well, there is what Swamiji is saying, the fear of domination by somebody's ego, by a separate self. Nobody wants to be dominated by an individual. But actually, what the guru is someone who channels the absolute, and so it's not domination. But the fear is there, and everybody's worried about false gurus and being subjugated. And we hear stories of Jonestown and all these horror stories and cults. Media loves it, so there's a kind of hysteria of it. But there's also a fascination with it, because the guru is always the most fascinating figure. It's very interesting, very sexy. It's amazing.
And why do you think that is?
Because the guru is an agent of the divine, and there's nothing more interesting and exciting than that.
Okay. Mr. Charles?
I think it was Osho who said very early on, the truth is controversial. And what does a guru or a master embody and express but the truth? And the truth in this understanding is the truth of unified consciousness. And unified consciousness is freedom. And freedom and the truth of unified consciousness always pushes the boundaries of the principles of bondage. Then from another perspective of why is it so controversial in our times and in our culture in the West, I think if we go to the spiral dynamic model and look at the non-integral tiers of consciousness.
You mean the lower tiers?
The lower tiers of consciousness, where egocentricity is predominantly the majority, and egocentricity is fear-based, and that's the majority. And where does the master or the guru live? In the integral tiers, beyond egocentricity, and there's the conflict. The majority is holding on to separation and the maintenance of history, and the guru is antithetical to that. Absolutely the opposite. And I also think that these times are very poignant in this regard, because we are on the precipice of another quantum leap in consciousness. And that is an update, a radical update of the model, the cosmology. And how does that come about? Who are the instigators and the catalysts of that update? Always the most radical, always the most controversial. Whoever the master ever was who participated in that update was always a controversy, and those are the masters of today. They are the catalysts. So of course, it goes with the territory. You are going to be negated. You are going to be invalidated. But to yourself, you can't ever be invalidated. You can't ever be in any way negated. You are who you are, and the truth forever sings in your being, and that's all you can express. It goes with the territory.
So that's something I'd like to talk about a little bit later, about the inherent controversy that realization is going to initiate in the kind of world stream and stream of development and evolution.